Okay, we're live. Hi, Elliot Fishman here. It's not 12 o'clock when I usually give my Facebook Live, but it's 8 o'clock at night. And I guess the truth is, most people will watch this after it's been recorded, but nevertheless, hope you're here. I did not do a 12 o'clock today. I was at a meeting in Washington, D.C., a meeting that's running Jenny Abramson, her venture capital fund runs, and they had some amazing speakers, and I'm honored to get invited every year. I think I'm the only non-investor. Just really a tremendous meeting, probably about 6 or 8 speakers from different CEOs, different companies, technology ranging from robotics to postmenopausal care to childhood diseases, and I left a whole bunch of things out. The mayor of Washington, D.C., three-time mayor, who's not running for re-election, she spoke. Just really, someone from the Melissa Gates is Foundation spoke. So it was really a great meeting, and again, I appreciate being invited. It was a little strange. It's in the Naval Yards, which is a really nice area I've never been to. In Washington, it's where the new stadium is, so it's a lot of new stuff there. But yesterday in Baltimore, probably on the East Coast in general, it was in the 80s to 90s. And today, in the middle of the meeting, when I went, it was raining. I took an Uber. But in the middle, probably about 10 or 11 o'clock, it started snowing. It was like a blizzard. Now, not much of it stuck because it was 35 degrees, but the whole way home, fortunately in an Uber, I didn't have to pay attention. Snow and snow and snow. So really crazy weather here on the East Coast. Literally, it was almost 50 degrees colder. One day was put your coats away. One day was put your boots on. Um, the other thing today is on Thursday night. On Sunday, I'm going out to the Nvidia meeting in San Jose, so that'll be really exciting. Monday, I'll be waving to everybody. I'll be at Jensen Wong's talk, his state of the art, which is always amazing. So I'll be there for that and be going to a bunch of meetings, and it should be a lot of fun. And I'll tell you what's going on in the world of AI, because this is the meeting where everything that's being done is shown, and everything new will also be spoken about. So it should be very exciting, and I look forward to a bunch of days on the West Coast for that meeting. Tonight, I'm going to speak about renal masses and just really talk about renal protocols. Again, CT is the state of the art for detecting and staging renal disease. We often will have patients present with flank pain, hematuria, but when you look at the stats, only about 40% of patients with renal cell carcinoma present with hematuria, which is the most common presentation, but the most common is probably an incidental finding. As we scan more and more patients, particularly older patients, you pick up small masses. Uh, a lot of them are papillary, though only 15% of tumors are papillary. But they're low-grade tumors, even if they're clear cell, partial nephrectomy, RF ablation if necessary. All those things can be done. Again, in terms of the radiologist role, things look different on different phases. If you don't have hematuria and you're just doing a routine abdomen, you may only have one phase to look at. Maybe it's only venous. So sometimes you can look at a lesion and say, well, I see a really well-defined lesion, and the first thing you want to do is blow it off. But then you measure, and it measures 45 Hounsfield units. Now, if you don't have old scans or non-contrast or something else, you may look and say, well, maybe it's a papillary, and you should think about that. Papillaries are small, though they can be larger, well defined, but on the single phase, you only have one point of contact. Papillaries enhance to about 90, but on the venous phase, they may be 40 or 50. On an excretory phase, they may be 30 or 40. On a non-contrast, they might be 25 or 30. Remember that non-contrast CT, that most typical number for a lesion that's a renal cell is 37 Hounsfield units. So we talk about under 10, well-defined, sharply marginated as benign, and maybe people will go up to 15 or 20, but you have to be really careful in looking at lesions, particularly when you only have a single phase. So you may need to recommend doing more phases, maybe a non-contrast only, or doing MR. But again, you need to be really conscious of that. In terms of staging renal tumors, again, we talk about under 90 is papillary, over 110 is going to typically be clear cell. Clear cells make up about 80% of tumors. Clear cells can be very vascular and typically are. They can grow right into the renal vein, right into the IVC. They can have extensive neovascularity and AV shunting. Again, on a late phase imaging, you really can't tell between a clear cell and a papillary, but when you do arterial or venous, the average attenuation of a papillary, I mentioned, is up to 90, but a clear cell, it's typically 130 or better. Surely if you use a threshold of 100 and you say under 100 is papillary, over 100 is clear cell, you'll be right in better than 90% of the cases. So that can be very helpful. I think it's important when we do protocols, particularly when you're staging, you want to be able to look at the vessels carefully. So you want to get a good look at the number of renal arteries. Renal arteries typically aren't involved, but location of tumor to the renal arteries can become very important. It may determine whether a patient is a partial nephrectomy candidate or needs a classic total nephrectomy. These days, of course, the AUA, American Urologic Association, recommends clear that a partial nephrectomy is what you want to do. You only do a total nephrectomy if a partial nephrectomy is not going to work because of lesion location. Not so much size. You can have a huge mass off the upper pole or lower pole, but if something's critically located by the vessels in the hilum, then you're kind of stuck. You can end up doing a nephrectomy. But partial is the way you want to go. Partial these days is done mainly laparoscopically, much faster recovery. The results are the same. It's sort of a classic way of doing things, so that becomes very, very important. In terms of analyzing images, at a minimum, axial, multiplanar, particularly coronal, very helpful. Look at the arteries, look at the veins, look at excretory phase imaging, look at the calyces. Sometimes you can be dealing with a transitional cell. Usually you can tell because TCCs have the involvement of the pelvis or calyces, but sometimes a clear cell or papillary can involve the calyces, so there can be some overlap to that. You also want to make certain you stage correctly, so you want to look for adenopathy, particularly in the para-aortic regions, aortic space. And tracking downward, you want to make sure you're dealing with clear cell and not a TCC. Look carefully at the bladder. Don't miss a multiple synchronous lesion type process. And again, clear cells are typically hypervascular. We talk about clear cell metastasizing to things like pancreas, liver. Liver, can occur early, relatively early, but things like pancreas, which is, the number one met to the pancreas is from a renal cell carcinoma, but typically those are patients who've had renal cell carcinoma for more than a decade. The good news, you go in, you do a Whipple's procedure or a distal, you can, excuse me, you resect the tumor and the patient will do fine. So again, how we stage becomes very, very important. On the CTisus website, lots of cases. We've added a whole bunch of new cases of different renal tumors. Again, remember, look at the renal cell, look at the papillary versus clear cell, look at transitional cell carcinoma. Again, calyces, renal pelvis, infiltration, amputation are all things we talk about. We talk about lymphoma of the kidneys. That was a different talk. Can be solid or multiple masses, the infiltration, perirenal, pararenal space involvement, much bulkier, much more aggressive. So typically, those tumors aren't an issue. Can be challenges sometimes distinguishing oncocytomas from renal cell carcinoma. That's a potential problem. Again, transitional cell carcinoma, a key reminder for all renal evaluation is make sure you have excretory phase imaging. We want to be about 4 or 5 minutes, but sometimes TCCs look identical to RCCs, and unless you have delayed phase imaging, you don't know because the calyces aren't distended, and you think the tumor is just infiltrating by direct extension rather than simply just the infiltration. So let's see who's here. I see Liliana's here from New York, and Liliana's in New York, but outside of New York in Westchester somewhere. Um, Liliana, Pam Johnson told me she saw your husband at the all-staff meeting at Sloan Kettering the other day. Um, and so Liliana, who worked with me for a bunch of years at Hopkins, then went to California and worked at UCSF, where she worked with or for or with the person who won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. So it's a lot better than working for me, who I did not win a Nobel Prize. And now she's working in New York. But, or she, no, I think she's still working California, but remotely, but living in New York. Her husband is at Sloan Kettering, which is an excellent place to be at in New York City. So with that, I'll stop there. Yeah, and I see Liliana said she did. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So what I'll be doing is I'll report back to you from the meeting and from the Nvidia meeting, tell you what's new in terms of medical imaging. I'm going to Monday to the session with Kimberly Powell, who's head of healthcare for Nvidia, meeting with her, and then I think there's a reception. There's a bunch of talks on Monday and talks on Tuesday on healthcare. So I'm interested in seeing those. So that should be a lot of fun. That should be a lot of fun. And with that, I'll wish everybody a happy evening. And I got my Lustgarten T-shirt on. You can see purple Lustgarten, right? Right. Lustgarten is supports our work on pancreatic cancer research, and I won't tell you how much, but it's significant. We were honored by Lustgarten giving us a new grant, which takes effect April 1st, which is only in less than a month, for the next 3+ years to continue on our early detection of pancreatic cancer. We had a meeting this morning. I know we're getting really, really good results. We're working really hard. Our team, working with Microsoft, working with Lustgarten. So it's a lot of people's effort doing just amazing work. So we take great pride, and I take great pride in what people are doing and really working hard. And some of the articles you can read that have been published, others are in press or been submitted, others are being worked on. So we're really, really excited about where we're going and where we need to be. So there's I see Liliana here. Okay. Anyway, everybody have a great evening and speak to you soon.